I never thought the last time I would see my mother alive, I would feel so powerless. She had been sick for months, but somehow, my mind refused to accept the inevitability. And yet, here I was standing in the cold, grey morning at her funeral, the sky as mournful as I felt. Flowers lay scattered on the polished wooden coffin, their colours a cruel contrast to the emptiness in my chest. My father stood beside me, as rigid and cold as always. Even in mourning, he seemed untouchable, a figure carved out of stone. People whispered condolences, but their words barely registered. I felt alone, even with 100 sympathetic eyes on me. Then I saw it. He reached for a wooden box, small but sturdy, polished dark brown, with brass hinges that glinted in the dim light. He gripped it with a force that made the wood creak, turned to me, and for a brief second, I thought he might hand it to me. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was trying to offer comfort. Instead, he stormed to the river that cut behind our property, and without a word, without explanation, he threw it. The box hit the water with a sickening splash and sank instantly beneath the current. I froze. A crowd of mourners murmured, but nobody moved. My heart pounded. "Dad, wait, what are you doing?" I called out, my voice cracking. He didn't answer. He didn't even look back. I ran to the riverbank, but the water was swift, swallowing the box like it had never existed. My hands trembled and a cold realization settled in my chest. Whatever was in that box mattered. It was important. Too important to be discarded like trash. Why? I whispered to the wind, but the only answer was the hollow rush of the river. Then, as if to confirm the betrayal, he turned his back completely and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the mud, in grief, in shock. The funeral faded around me. The flowers, the whispers, the sympathetic looks, they all became meaningless. All that remained was the wooden box, and my father, vanishing into the distance like he had erased himself from my life. I sank to my knees, sobbing, and tried to piece together what had just happened. Why would he throw something so precious away? Something that had belonged to my mother. That night, I sat in my empty room, staring at the ceiling. My father hadn't come home. He hadn't called. He hadn't left a single note. All I had was a memory of him throwing that box into the river, his expression unreadable, and a gnawing fear in my stomach that I would never find out what was inside. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the box. This was about me, because the next morning, I realized something even scarier. My father had left me. Completely. No warnings, no explanations. Just gone. And that's when I understood my life had changed forever. The days after the funeral passed in a blur. But grief doesn't move in a straight line. It creeps, it crushes, it lingers. My father never returned. Not a call. Not a message. Just silence. Friends and relatives came by, offering awkward condolences and casseroles I didn't have the appetite to eat. I drifted through the motions, going through my mother's belongings, each item a knife twisting in my chest. And then there was the box. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why had he thrown it into the river? What could be so important that he would risk losing it forever, rather than giving it to me or even keeping it for himself? My father's coldness had always been a part of my life, but this was something else. This was deliberate, punitive. I tried calling him again and again, but every time it went straight to voicemail. I even left messages, pleading, crying, demanding answers. Nothing. He had disappeared like he had never existed. And each unanswered call only made the emptiness in my chest grow bigger. Late one night, I found a crumpled envelope tucked behind a stack of my mother's old photo albums. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't signed. But inside was a note, written in my mother's elegant handwriting. If anything happens to me, do not trust what seems obvious. Some truths are buried to protect you, not to hide from you. My hands shook. Buried truths. Protect me. Protect me from what? I looked around my empty room, as if the walls themselves would answer. But there was nothing. The next morning, I went to the river, retracing the steps my father had taken. The current was strong, and I knew the box was long gone. But there were traces: a piece of cloth snagged on a branch, scratches along the mud bank where he had slipped. It was enough to tell me he hadn't acted on impulse. He had thrown that box with purpose. As I stood there, shivering in the cold wind, a man approached. Mid-30s, dark hair, kind eyes. But there was something unsettling in the way he looked at me, like he already knew too much. "You're looking for something," he said. His voice calm but certain. I backed up instinctively. "Who are you?" "Someone who knew your mother," he replied. "And someone who knows your father. You shouldn't be here." What he did. It wasn't just anger. There's more at stake than you realize. A chill ran down my spine. That box. My father. My mother's secrets. Everything suddenly felt bigger than grief, bigger than abandonment. It felt dangerous. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all that came out was a shaky whisper. Tell me what I need to know." He smiled faintly, a knowing, almost sad smile. "You're stronger than you think. But first, you need to understand why your father left, and why he threw the box into the river." As he walked away, disappearing into the morning mist, I realized something terrifying. My life had shifted from mourning to a hunt. And whatever was in that box, it was only the beginning. 4 days after that encounter, I couldn't stop thinking about the man by the river. Who was he? How did he know my father? And most importantly, what was in that box? My nights were filled with restless dreams. My father's cold face, the box plunging into the dark water, and my mother's cryptic note whispering secrets I didn't yet understand. Finally, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to know. I started by talking to the neighbors who lived near the river. Most of them were polite, but distant, clearly uncomfortable with grief and confrontation. One elderly man, though, hesitated when I asked about my father's actions. "Yes, I saw him," he said, lowering his voice. "Through a box. Not the first time, either. That man. He's carrying more than just wood. He's carrying secrets." "What kind of secrets?" I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper. The old man shook his head. "Your family. Your mother. She had things she never told you. Things people would kill to get." My heart raced. Kill to get? Could it really be that serious? I'd imagined the box held letters, or maybe a photo, something sentimental. But this felt dangerous. Real danger. I left the old man's house, hands trembling, and returned to my apartment, where the emptiness seemed heavier than ever. That night, I began going through my mother's belongings with renewed intensity. Photo albums, jewelry boxes, drawers filled with everyday things. And then I found it, a hidden compartment in her writing desk. Inside was a pile of letters, some bound with a faded ribbon, and a small key. The letters were addressed to my father, but many of them never reached him. One caught my eye. It was from someone I didn't know, a lawyer, apparently discussing matters of inheritance and protection. The words were careful, almost coded. She must never know the full truth until it's safe. The box is her father's safeguard. If the wrong hands find it, the consequences will be irreversible. The box. My father. My mother. Suddenly, everything clicked. That wooden box was never just a keepsake, it was protection. Protection from someone, or something, I couldn't yet name. I felt a mix of fear and determination. My mother had died, my father had abandoned me. And yet here I was, left with clues, riddles, and a growing sense that my life had shifted into something bigger than grief. A dangerous puzzle. One I had to solve if I wanted to survive. And then, just as I was about to put the letters down, I heard a faint sound outside my apartment door, a knock. Quick and urgent. My pulse spiked. I opened it. Nobody was there. Only a single envelope. White, unmarked, with a faint scent of my mother's perfume. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing a single note. If you want to understand the truth about your father, come to the river at midnight. Alone. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed that this could be a trap. Every logical thought screamed to run. But something else, anger, grief, and the need for answers pulled me forward. I had to know why my father had thrown that box. I had to know what my mother had been protecting me from. And so, as night fell, I prepared to face whatever truth awaited me by the river. The river at midnight was nothing like I imagined. The water glistened under the pale moonlight, calm yet mysterious, almost taunting me with its silence. My heart pounded as I approached the spot where my father had thrown the box. The mist curled along the surface like fingers, reaching for me, whispering threats I couldn't name. I waited, tense, scanning the shadows. Minutes felt like hours. And then, I saw movement. A figure emerged from the fog, a man I had never met. Wearing a long coat that brushed against the wet grass. You came, he said. Calm, almost approving. I have to know, I said. My voice firm despite the fear coiling in my stomach. Why did my father throw the box? What's inside it? He nodded slowly, as if expecting me to ask. Your father. He's made mistakes. But this one was for you. He handed me a folder, thick with papers and photographs. I stared at it, confused. Your mother. She wasn't just my client, he continued. She was protecting something very important. Something that could destroy your family. If the wrong people found it. I opened the folder. Inside were letters, bank statements, and photographs. My mother had kept hidden investments, property deeds, and documents proving that my father had enemies I never knew about, people who wanted the family wealth and, possibly, harm to us. And the box? I asked, my hand shaking. The box contained the most sensitive parts, he said. The ones that, if revealed, could put you in danger. Your father threw it into the river to protect you, not to abandon you. I froze. My father. Protecting me. Everything I had felt, anger, betrayal, loneliness, fought against this revelation. Could it be true? Could the man I had hated my entire life have actually been trying to shield me? Before I could respond, the man added, there's more. Your mother's death. It wasn't natural. Someone wanted those secrets gone, and they're still searching. That's why your father left. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had killed my mother, or at least, made it look that way. And now, they were after me. I felt a rush of fear, but beneath it, a spark of determination. I had spent my life feeling powerless, abandoned, like a leaf drifting in the wind. But not anymore. My mother had trusted me, my father had tried to protect me, and now I would uncover the truth. He handed me a small, folded map, worn and creased. Follow this, he said. It will lead you to the remnants of the box. But be careful. They're watching. I held the map tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my mother, my father, our life was unraveling. And in its place was a puzzle, dark and dangerous, that I had no choice but to solve. As I left the river that night, the mist curling around me like a warning, I realized something chilling. My life had become a battlefield, and I had just been handed my first weapon. I followed the map the next day, my hands clutching it like a lifeline. It led me through narrow alleyways, abandoned warehouses, and finally, to a small clearing by the river, the same river where my father had thrown the box. But nothing looked familiar. The place was quiet, eerily still, as if holding its breath, and then I saw it, a faint glint in the mud. My heart skipped a beat. I ran forward, fingers brushing against something hard and rectangular. My breath caught as I pulled it free. It was the box. Mud-stained, waterlogged, but intact. Before I could open it, a voice called out from behind me. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." I spun around. A man stepped out from the shadows, tall, sharp-featured, with eyes that didn't blink. He wasn't the mysterious figure from before. This man radiated menace. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He smirked. "Let's just say, someone who knows what's inside that box." And I want it. Panic surged through me. I clutched the box tighter. "It's mine. It belongs to my family." He took a step closer. "Your father threw it into the river to keep it safe from me." The words made my stomach drop. My father had been protecting me, yes, but from this. From real, tangible danger. My mind raced. Who was he? And what did he want from my mother's secrets? I realized I couldn't outrun him. But I also couldn't hand over the box. Not now, not ever. In a surge of adrenaline, I bolted down the path, the box swinging at my side. The man chased me, his footsteps echoing in the night. I ducked behind trees, jumped over roots, and fought to keep the box from slipping. Every step felt like a heartbeat of fear and determination combined. Finally, I made it to a small, abandoned cabin marked on the map. I shoved the door closed behind me, leaned against it, and let out a shaky breath. Safe for the moment, I opened the box carefully. Inside, wrapped in velvet, were documents, photographs, and a small key. But one item made my breath catch, a letter addressed to me, in my mother's handwriting. "My dearest, if you are reading this, it means danger is near. Your father's actions may seem cruel, but they were for your protection. There are people who would harm us for what we have. Trust no one blindly. Use this wisely. And always remember, strength is born from the fire of loss." Tears blurred my vision. My father hadn't abandoned me. He had sacrificed connection, comfort, and peace to keep me alive. And now, it was up to me to finish what he started. But just as I was beginning to absorb the weight of her words, a noise outside the cabin made me freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Someone was coming, I realized, with a sickening certainty. That my journey had only just begun, and the people who had wanted the box were closer than I had ever imagined. I had been running for hours, or at least it felt that way. The forest around the river had turned into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, each step echoing the growing fear in my chest. I clutched the box like a lifeline. My mother's letter burned into my mind. Every word reminded me why I couldn't stop, why I couldn't let whoever was after us win. Finally, I reached a clearing I hadn't noticed before. Moonlight spilled across a small stone structure, half hidden in ivy. The map ended here. I hesitated, heart hammering. I had no idea what awaited me inside, but the truth, whatever it was here. I pushed open the creaking door. Dust and old parchment filled the air, and there, in the center, was another box, larger, locked, but unmistakably connected to the one my father had thrown. I sank to my knees, examining it, and then I noticed a folder leaning against the wall. Inside, photographs, legal papers, and personal letters unfolded. The story I had never imagined. My mother hadn't just been hiding money or documents, she had been protecting me from something far more dangerous. The photos showed people I didn't know, men and women in suits, faces serious, calculating. Some pictures showed them near our home, near the river, and even at my mother's hospital room before her death. It became terrifyingly clear my mother had been under surveillance. She had known the moment she died would put me in danger. And then, the biggest shock of all. One photograph showed my father not cold, not distant, but in a meeting with a woman I had never seen. They were smiling, handing over papers to someone unseen. The folder included a letter explaining everything. Your father's life has been more complicated than you know. He had enemies, people who would stop at nothing for what he and I protected. I kept this from you because it was safer for you not to know. The box you found is only part of the truth. The rest is in your hands now. Be careful whom you trust. I sank back against the wall, overwhelmed. My father had been protecting me all along, not from neglect, but from danger I hadn't even imagined. My mother's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. The box, the papers, the letters, they were pieces of a puzzle I now had to solve alone, and just as I absorbed the truth, I realized another terrifying thing. I wasn't alone. A shadow moved across the far corner of the room. My blood ran cold. Someone else was here, someone who had followed me. I gripped the box tightly, ready to defend myself, and stepped toward the shadow. Who's there? I demanded, voice trembling but defiant. A figure emerged. It was my father. His face was weary, lined with worry and exhaustion. I see you found everything, he said softly. Why didn't you tell me? I cried, tears streaming down my face. Why leave me alone? He shook his head. Because telling you would have put you in more danger. Every step I took was to keep you alive. I never wanted to abandon you. Never. For the first time in years, I saw the man behind the cold exterior. He wasn't cruel, he was protective, desperate, trying to shield me from enemies I hadn't even met. And in that moment, amidst the revelations, danger and grief, I realized something powerful. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was now part of a larger story, a story of survival, secrets, and reclaiming what was mine. And I would see it through, no matter the cost. The moment my father stepped forward, I felt a whirlwind of emotions: relief, anger, confusion. For years, I had blamed him for leaving me, for his coldness, for the emptiness that had haunted every corner of my life. And yet now, seeing the exhaustion etched into his face, I realized how wrong I had been. We don't have much time, he said, his voice tight. They know where we are. The people after the box, they won't stop until they get what's theirs. I clutched the box tighter. Then why didn't you protect us better? Why did you leave me alone? He lowered his gaze. Because I had to draw them away. I had to make them think you were vulnerable. I made myself the target so you could survive. I know it doesn't make up for years of mistakes, but I did it for you. The words hit me harder than any betrayal ever could. Anger surged, then faded into a strange mixture of understanding and sorrow. He hadn't abandoned me, he had sacrificed his presence to keep me alive. Suddenly, the door to the cabin burst open. Shadows poured in, figures I had glimpsed in the photographs, the same men my mother had feared. Their faces were stern, and their intentions were clear. They wanted the box. "Step aside," one of them commanded, his voice cold and unyielding. My father moved protectively in front of me. "You'll have to go through me first." I realized then that I couldn't wait for him to fight alone. This was my fight too. I had spent my life feeling powerless, letting circumstances control me. Not anymore. I tightened my grip on the box, stepping beside him. "You won't take it," I said, my voice steady, echoing in the empty cabin. "Whatever it contains, it's ours. And you're not getting it." A tense silence filled the room. Then one of the men lunged forward. My father moved instinctively, but I acted without thinking. I swung the box, the corner hitting the intruder in the chest. He stumbled back, shocked, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Adrenaline surged. I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was standing my ground. I was protecting what mattered. The confrontation escalated, a blur of movement and shouted threats. But through it all, I felt a strange clarity. My mother's warning, my father's sacrifice, and the lessons of my own grief had prepared me for this moment. Finally, the intruders backed down, realizing that taking the box by force wouldn't be easy. They retreated, disappearing into the shadows, but the threat lingered. I sank to the floor, heart racing, my father beside me. We were safe, for now. But I knew this was only the beginning. The battle for the truth, for survival, and for the legacy my mother had protected was far from over. As I looked at my father, I whispered, "I understand now. I'll fight with you. I'll protect what she wanted me to protect." And in that moment, the bond we had lost to years of misunderstanding and coldness began to mend, forged anew in fire, fear, and the unbreakable will to survive. The morning after the confrontation, the forest felt different. The mist had lifted, sunlight filtered through the trees, and for the first time in weeks I felt alive. Fear still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I had survived the night, faced danger head-on, and discovered the truth about my parents and the enemies who had been hiding in the shadows. My father and I returned to the cabin, determined to organize the documents from the box and plan our next move. The papers revealed names, transactions, and hidden alliances, people who had tried to steal my mother's legacy, who had endangered our lives, who had underestimated me. "You're ready," my father said quietly, looking at me with something between pride and awe. "You understand what's at stake. You can finish this." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the surge of determination. I wasn't just protecting my family, I was reclaiming it. Over the next few days, I began putting our plan into action. First, I contacted trusted allies, lawyers my mother had worked with, friends who had remained loyal despite the chaos. Using the evidence from the box, we started exposing the people who had tried to manipulate and endanger us. The first confrontation was both terrifying and liberating. I faced one of the men who had come for the box, calmly presenting evidence of his crimes, recording the confession, and ensuring he could never harm us again. Watching him squirm, realizing that the power had shifted, was intoxicating. With each victory, my confidence grew. I learned to read danger, anticipate betrayal, and navigate the treacherous web my parents had left behind. My grief was still there, but it no longer paralyzed me. It fueled me. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Strength is born from the fire of loss. The most satisfying moment came when I confronted the people who had orchestrated my mother's suffering. They tried to intimidate me, but I stood firm, evidence in hand, refusing to be cowed. The fear was no longer mine, it was theirs. By the end of the week, the major threats had been neutralized. The box, once a symbol of danger and mystery, had become a symbol of my power. I had turned grief into action, betrayal into strategy, and fear into courage. Sitting beside my father that night, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the abandoned daughter, lost and powerless. I was a force to be reckoned with. And the people who had tried to destroy my family had learned the hard way. You never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. For the first time, I felt like I had reclaimed my life. The river no longer felt ominous. Its waters sparkled under the afternoon sun, a reminder of how far I had come. Standing there, the box safely locked in my hands, I thought about the journey that had started with grief, confusion, and betrayal. I had lost my mother, faced the anger I had felt toward my father, and uncovered secrets that could have destroyed me. But I had also discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, courage I had buried under years of doubt, and a resilience forged in the fire of loss. Sitting beside the river, I opened the box one last time. Inside were the letters, photographs, and documents that had been the key to my family's survival. I traced my mother's handwriting, reading the words that had guided me when I felt most lost. She had known that one day I would need to make choices, to confront danger, and to take control. I thought of my father. Once distant, cold, almost unreachable, he had revealed himself as a protector, a man willing to sacrifice everything for my safety. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about him, it was about freeing myself from the chains of anger and resentment. I made a promise to myself, quietly, firmly. I would live for both of them. I would honor my mother's wisdom, my father's sacrifices, and the life I had reclaimed through struggle. The threats were gone, the enemies exposed, and the danger dissipated, but the lessons remained. Trust, resilience, and courage were no longer abstract words. They were the foundation of who I had become. As I walked away from the river, the box secure, I felt the weight of the past lift. Life was not about what we lose, it was about what we do with what we have left. And I had everything I needed: strength, knowledge, and the unwavering will to protect what mattered most. I glanced back one last time. The water glimmered, reflecting the sunlight, a symbol of both endings and beginnings. And as I walked forward into the unknown, I knew this was not just the end of a story, it was the beginning of the life I was meant to live. I was no longer the abandoned daughter. I was a survivor, a protector, and the keeper of my family's truth, and this time, nothing could stop me. Alright everyone, that's all I have for today. If you found this entertaining, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. If you want to watch more, please check out our playlist. Finally, a huge thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.